What is the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced while home alone? Story 1. A couple years back, I woke up at 3 a.m. to see someone walk past my bedroom door. I called out in my just woken up, not thinking haze, thinking maybe my boyfriend had come over while I was sleeping, but got no response, so knew it wasn't him. Got out of bed, stupidly forgetting to take my phone or any kind of defensive item with me, and went into the front room where the light was on to be met with a random guy staring at one of the walls. I asked him who he was and got no answer. At this point, I'd actually woken up enough to realize I could really be in trouble, so ran back to the bedroom, grabbed my phone, and ran outside on the phone to the police, who showed up within a few minutes. Turns out the guy was mentally ill, and to this day, neither myself or the police know how he got in. Story 2. I moved into our house a month before my husband did, and I was painting our guest room with the windows wide open. I was busy painting, listening to music when I realized it had gotten dark outside. I heard the leaves crunching outside, but didn't think anything of it because we have a lot of neighbors who walk their dogs. When I went to close the windows, I saw a man standing in my backyard under the tree, maybe 5 feet from our back door, staring up at me. I fell to the floor and realized the back glass door was probably open and nothing but the screen, which he could have easily just walked into my house. Crawled to my phone and called my husband, who then called 911 while rushing home to me. We have a 6 feet tall fence around our yard. This person hopped it to watch me. I couldn't sleep right at night for months. Story 3. One day while I was working afternoons a couple years back, I woke up at around 10 a.m. and started to watch American Dad before getting up. Next thing you know, I hear my back door open. A normal thing in our home since we only use the back door. But no one was supposed to be home yet. I assumed it was my mom and didn't think anything of it. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs as my bedroom was on the second floor. I call out to my mom and get no response. Then my door cracks open and a head pops in. It's a 30-ish-year-old man with a blonde beard and a big mane of greasy hair who looks shocked to see me. At the time I was about 260 pounds, 6'3", and 20 years old. I was also sitting in only my boxers. Before I was able to realize what was happening, he asked, "Is this the residence?" To which I replied, "No." He makes a swift exit, and before I can recollect my thoughts, he's not even in my driveway. Talking to a family friend who is a veteran police officer, it turns out a man has been pulling this kind of stunt to rob people in nearby towns. Story 4. I was babysitting a kid who had a video monitor and was told that she wouldn't wake up while the parents were out, and if she did, call them right away. I was watching TV with the monitor set off to the side to keep an eye on her, and right around 11, the camera's view shifted a few inches. It then began to slightly jiggle like someone was messing with it. I was squinting at it, trying to decide what I was actually seeing, and I kid you not, the whole screen burst to static for a few seconds, and the kid started walking. She stood up and was screaming in her crib, just like one of the kids from The Sims. When she didn't fall back asleep after a few minutes, I called Mom, and she said, "Okay, we're on our way home anyway. We think she has nightmares. Sometimes it's fine." Never again. Story 5. I was about 21 or 22 and living by myself at the time, and I left my window open on a pleasant night. It was low enough to the ground that you could get in if you really tried, but the screen wasn't easy to take off, and I lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, so I didn't even think twice about it. Woke up in the middle of the night because I smelled smoke, and I reached out to turn on my lamp, and my hand hit what was very obviously a person. My brain fully woke up at that point, and I realized there was a shirtless man in my bedroom smoking a cigarette and staring at me. I remember yelling for him to get out, and I must have spooked him just as badly as he spooked me because he leapt out my window and took off. I slammed it shut and moved a bookcase in front of it, and when I went out the next morning in the daylight, I found the screen sitting against the house. Didn't sleep the rest of the night, and I haven't slept with a window more than cracked ever since. I also absolutely refused to live on the ground floor of a building. I don't know if he was planning to rob me, but it was absolutely terrifying and makes me wonder how many times it happened, and I didn't wake up. Story 6. I was home from university for the summer and didn't have a job, so I was home alone whilst everyone was at work. I live in a small village on a quiet street, so it was completely normal to have all the windows and doors open during the day. Late in the afternoon, I get a call from my dad. I'm around the corner but struggling to get into the street. I'll explain when I'm home, but lock all the doors, close the windows, and go upstairs. This was obviously strange. We don't live in a bad area, and my dad's sense of humor isn't that mean, but the tone in his voice made me do it without hesitation. Everything is closed and locked, and upstairs I go. A few minutes later, I get a second call from my dad. Some police are going to be going through the side gate into the back garden to check the shed. I'll be home soon. Again, I was terrified, but knew to just ask later. Stayed upstairs, but did see armed police checking the back garden. When my dad finally got home, I obviously asked what had happened. Turns out some 16-year-old kid on our street had taken some legal highs, stabbed a neighbor, then did a runner. Absolutely terrifying, but a sad part is they found him at nighttime because he is scared of the dark and came out of hiding. Story 7. When I was 19 in my first apartment, I had someone knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw this burly heavyset man who abruptly started screaming to let him in. He was screaming things like he was going to beat my butt and kick the door down if I didn't open. I called the cops, and as soon as someone got on the phone, he started body slamming my door to break in. I was freaking out and crying as they quickly had 5 cops show up within 5+ minutes. As soon as he heard the sirens, he quickly walked away, and they met him at the bottom of the stairs. Apparently, he was after the previous renter, but was extremely intoxicated. They arrested him, and thankfully, he never came back. I ended up breaking my lease and moving out 3 months later. It was in a very nice neighborhood, but it quickly made me wish I was back home with family instead of being on the other side of the United States. Story 8. I have been pretty fortunate based on these comments, but I was home alone one night while my wife and son were visiting my MIL. I walked back to our bedroom to see someone rummaging through my son's room on the video baby monitor. Immediately, grabbed my firearm and yelled to the other side of the house, "I am armed, come out slowly," over and over while slowly making my way back to his room. Got there, flipped on the light, and nothing. Searched the whole house, pumped full of adrenaline. Finally satisfied I was alone, I went back to my room, and the guy was back in the room. I took a closer look, and I am ashamed to say I was looking at myself. The camera is a live feed on our Wi-Fi, and it was streaming on a huge delay. I have never known it to do that, and it has not done it since. Story 9. My BF worked away from home a lot, and I always struggled to sleep on the first night he was away. On this occasion, I was woken by the sound of a man shouting, and then someone banging on wood or a front door. I jumped up and looked out my bedroom window, just in time to see a man dressed all in black walking through our garden towards the house. I ran to the front of the house to look out of the front window and make sure he kept going. He did, but he met up with another man dressed in black walking towards my house. I was terrified and called the police. They arrived in a matter of minutes and checked out the back garden, but they were gone. Turned out a neighbor had caught them both trying to steal his car, and one had escaped through the gardens, while the other had run through the roads, and they had met up outside my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and my brother came to stay the next night. I'm so glad I live in an apartment now, with much more security. Story 10. I work from home, so I'm home alone a lot. One day I was working, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed some movement in my backyard. There was a man jumping over my fence into my backyard. Panicked, I called my then boyfriend and fiancé and told him what was happening. While I'm on the phone with him, I get a knock at my front door. It's a woman from CenturyLink, informing me that technicians will need access to my backyard. I tell her someone just jumped over my fence, so I think they're already there. Way to give me a heart attack. CenturyLink. Story 11. Somebody tried to break into the house while I was by myself. The whole place was quiet and dark at nighttime. I walked past the front door to go upstairs for bed, and the handle suddenly started jerking around, like the Hulk was trying to get in. Then whoever it was started to either kick or shoulder the door, and it was making the whole frame jiggle. I completely froze, and my mind went blank. Just standing there like an idiot and staring. My dog bolted down the stairs like it was her time to shine, scrambled on the tile, and let loose the most vicious barks I've ever heard, whoever it was left. She was a very good girl. I miss her. Story 12. You know those tongs in the kitchen that have a spring but a latch to keep them together. I had a pair of those, and I put the latch on and put them down on the counter. I went away for a bit and came back, and then they jumped off the counter at me. Biggest jump scare of my life. The latch had come undone and they sprung open. But in the millisecond, when inanimate objects suddenly come to life and jump at you, you don't realize this and totally freak out. Story 13. One afternoon, someone knocked at my back door. I thought it was the guy coming to read our meter, so I opened the door. Next thing I know, 2 huge guys pushed into the house, and one of them threw me up against the wall. Then they shoved me down on the couch. They told me they were Hell's Angels, and they were pissed because my BF was selling too much drugs. cutting into their profits. They kept calling me by my next door neighbor's name. We had suspected they were selling drugs. All of the people stopping by for less than 5 minutes made it pretty obvious. I just kept telling them I wasn't her. One of them searched the house, while the other kept me pinned to the couch. They started to realize they were in the wrong house because they couldn't find anything where they were told it was. My neighbor's house is a single floor with a basement. My house is a 4-level back split. Then I showed them my mail. Because it showed my name, and they knew they screwed up, they started telling me that they were after my neighbor's BF because he assaulted their cousin, which I knew was BS. But I didn't care. I just wanted them to leave. They robbed me of my cash and left. I now have locks on my screen doors. Story 14. Not exactly alone, but I was home with my newborn son and someone knocked on the front door. I was expecting my mother, but she usually comes in through the garage. I thought it was strange, but yelled, "Come in!" Because why wouldn't I? Then this cracked out old woman comes stumbling through the door and asked me for a ride to the nearest gas station. I told her I didn't have a car seat for my son, so I couldn't go anywhere. So she starts screaming, "That's just inappropriate," and doesn't stop even when I'm telling her she needs to leave or I'll call the cops. After a minute or so, my mother actually pulls in the driveway. The crackhead sees the car and bolts back out the door, and I never see her again. That night, my truck got broken into. Can't for sure say it was the same woman, but I have her description to the cops anyway. Story 15. I was asleep at home alone. When I turned over in bed, I casually opened my eyes a little whilst turning, and they were shut again just as quickly. In that split second, I could have sworn I had seen a man standing at the bottom of my bed. I laid still, awake with my eyes closed, trying not to act like I was awake and trying to listen for any sound in the room of someone breathing or moving. Couldn't hear anything. I was too scared to open my eyes and look, consoled myself that there wasn't any way someone could have gotten in without me hearing a window smash, and fell back asleep. When I got up in the morning, though, the front door was open. They didn't take anything and left no signs of being there. Was still very, very creepy, though. Story 16. Was home with my infant twin daughters, who were sound asleep. I was watching TV in the lower level of my tri-level home. On that level, the windows looked out to the backyard, and as I got up to go to the kitchen, something caught my attention. What looks like a pale left arm is being subtly illuminated outside in the far right window, maybe 6 inches away from the window. It is angled straight down as if to steady itself. My heart sank. Then I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. I ran up the few stairs to the main floor and grabbed my phone and returned to see if it was still there. Nope, nothing. I've never been remotely shaken like I was then. Called the non-emergency police, and when they arrived, walked to the backyard with the officers, but didn't find anything. They were great and kept saying calling them was the right thing to do. It's what we are here for, etc. Don't know what it was, but the image is seared into my memory. Story 17. When I was a kid, I heard a noise in the backyard one night and looked out the sliding glass door to see our very friendly dog facing away from me on the patio. The porch light only illuminated to the edge of it, and I could only see up to the back of her head. She was looking up, maybe even jumping up, and had her rear lowered and her tail wagging like someone was standing in front of her. I think she heard me and kind of turned around to look back at me. And at this point, something grabbed the back of the patio chair and pulled it into the darkness. I obviously freaked out and went screaming down the hall to my parents' room, prompting my dad to search the backyard in his underwear while wielding a baseball bat. But he never found anything. I should also mention the window to my room was near the gate, so I would have heard and seen anyone had they entered the backyard through the gate. Also, the backyard was surrounded by brick walls, but they were difficult to climb over due to security features. Story 18. A few years back, I was home alone during a power storm. I went into the bathroom to take a dump, and at the exact time I was pooping, I sneezed. Well, the power went out as well. The house was pitch black, and I literally thought I crapped myself blind. I couldn't see my hands, so in a panic I was yelling, "No, this cannot be true." I was in a panic feeling for the toilet paper to wipe and flush. After completing the task, I just sat on the toilet trying to figure out how to tell everyone I know that I literally crapped myself blind by sneezing while crapping. After about 2 minutes of complete darkness and dread and panic, lightning struck outside and lit up my hallway. Best damn feeling ever. Story 19. I forgot about this one before I posted another, but the day a naked teenager asked for help. I was loading laundry while my baby napped in my apartment just a door down. The naked kid was being followed by an extremely tall and muscular man who was responsible for the nakedness and kept trying to get the kid to lower his voice and go inside his apartment. I didn't have a phone with me, and it was scary while I looked for one. Shout out to Bedford, Texas Police Department. They had two police cars blocking the parking lot exits before I hung up with the police. It was less than 2 minutes total from when I started dialing to the officers separating the victim from the attacker. Their response time was awesome. And that child was so brave, as this guy kept a stream of crap like, "You know how much this is going to hurt your mom if you tell? She's going to be heartbroken if you ruin this for her." That kid shook and shouted back things like, "Well, isn't that your fault? And if you cared at all, you never would have touched me. And my mom loves me. She's only going to ask why I didn't tell her sooner." I didn't know him at all, but I was so proud of that boy. Head bowed and embarrassed to be naked in public, he was still so strong and refused to be made ashamed of what someone else had done to him. Story 20. My roommates were out of town and my dog started growling in the middle of the night at something at the end of a dark hallway. She never behaved like that, so I was genuinely freaked out. Then I started hearing noises coming from my kitchen on the other side of the house. I was fully convinced someone was in there, so like any idiot in a movie, I got a flashlight and a weapon and went to investigate. As soon as the flashlight hit the kitchen area, something freaked out and knocked a bunch of crap over. I was terrified, and then my flashlight hit the culprit. A huge raccoon had snuck through the doggy door and was eating my dog's food in the kitchen. We made eye contact, and it immediately fled outside. Story 21. This was when I was a kid home alone. I usually move around a lot while I sleep. I woke up and hadn't moved. I thought it was cool and it would be super easy to make my bed. I grabbed the bedding and moved it back a little before tossing it in place. There was something black sticking out. I tossed the bedding back further. There was a massive black wasp in my bed, an inch from where it was sleeping. Buzzing loudly pissed me off. I put the bedding back down and proceeded to try and crush it until the buzzing stopped. I grew up on a farm, and bugs usually don't bother me, but I checked my bed for weeks after that. Story 22. One night I was home alone, grillin' and chillin', drinking beer and smoking dope, about half lit, wearing my home clothes. It was a great time. As soon as I sat down to eat, I heard a woman yelling for help and pounding on doors. Once I realized she wasn't a threat to me, I sprinted up the road to find her. She was covered in blood and told me her husband was trapped in the truck he flipped. She kept trying to get me to help her pull him out of the truck, and I said, "Lady, I know this is an emergency, but I ain't no EMT. The worst part was, I live in the woods with no cell service. But luckily, I was able to get to my landlord's attention so he could call 911 from the landline. I was up until 3 a.m. that night because I could not wind down after the fact. Everyone survived, and the guy got out on his own. But it was the scariest night of my life. Story 23. I had a choking scare when I was like 11, and I was home alone and watching TV while eating Skittles. I like to put a bunch in my mouth and make like a Skittle ball that I would chew on. Something on the show I was watching made me laugh, and I swallowed the ball and it got lodged in my throat. I then experienced a few seconds of sheer terror, because I realized that there was nobody here to help me at all, and I was probably going to die. Then I remembered some cartoon or something where someone jammed their stomach on a chair and got something unstuck from their throat. So I lunged at the corner of the recliner as hard as I could with my stomach, and it actually worked and popped the small ball out. It was super lucky because I really had no idea what I was doing, but it was one of the worst feelings I have ever experienced. Definitely never ate Skittles that way again after that. Story 24. My dad dropped me off at home after bringing my sister to a party, and I walked into a CD blaring super loud on our big old-fashioned speakers. The CD was super hot when I took it out, so it had to have been playing for a long time, but I hadn't heard it going when we left. Turns out my sister had left the CD in, and then while we were gone, there was a tiny power outage that made the music start again. Kinda silly, but all that was going through my head was, my favorite band is really going to be the soundtrack to my death? Nice. Story 25 was playing Xbox on my home theater setup. 100-inch projector screen, surround sound, the whole shebang. Mind you, I had the headset on with the game audio, so I turned the volume of the surround sound receiver completely off. Just me, big screen in the dark room. Was thunder storming outside, me playing some COD. Next thing you know, everything goes, black power goes out. That's when I went pale. Well, when the power went out and reset, so did the surround sound receiver. Who would have known at reset it would turn it back on full blast white noise? Pitch black room, surround sound. White noise on full blast. Full blast, crazy loud. I couldn't process what was happening. I thought I just got struck by lightning.